There aren't a lot of things I expect from RPGs, as no matter the context, the premise of each game in the genre remains the same. Grow stronger and defeat evil. Things that grow stronger in video games should do so visually and functionally. This can vary by game and character, as the ways that each character can interact with the world are limited by the respective game and its mechanics. That being said, 90% of the time, that's going to mean that the same actions you've been executing are going to be doing slightly more damage than before against the same enemies until the enemies you are fighting are outgrown. Then you're ready to move on to the next zone where the process is repeated. This in turn is repeated until the experience is over. In a nutshell, this loop of growth is the only thing an RPG really needs to be considered so. The deliciousness of this formula lies in the flourishing of the details of each step. How is damage dealt, and by who or what? How long will it take for you to outgrow an area? What do the enemies look like? What kind of people are areas populated with? The first aspect we will be ranking this game by is weapon variety, and Final Fantasy I gets an F, a big F, in weapon variety. It feels like the warrior knight class was favored in the design process heavily. A good 70% of the equipment you will have access to, either by opening a treasure chest or purchasing it from a shop, are swords and shields that only the warrior has access to using. Robes, staves, daggers, hammers, and axes all take a back seat. Of the 67 total weapons, 34 of them are swords that are mostly equipable to warriors and knights and thieves and ninjas. This isn't including axes, which are exclusively equipable by warriors, knights, and ninjas, which would bring the total to 42. 42 out of 67 weapons are slashing weapons of some sort that only a single class can equip. Casters in Final Fantasy I are left hurting for weapon variety, as the white and black mages will both go large stretches of this game with no upgrade to speak of for their weapons. Armor variety isn't as much of an issue, considering most of the purchasable rings, robes, and armor will stand even with whatever you can pick up in a dungeon if you aren't a white or black mage. Robe classes specifically have very little to do with their equipment. White mages and white wizards can only equip 4 out of 17 of the available hats and 3 out of 15 of the available shields. They have access to 1/3 of the available pieces of armor, unless you take away all of the options which can be equipped by every class, which leaves the white mage with 4 pieces of unique equipment to equip in a 25-hour playthrough. The black mage and red mage fare slightly better, but only slightly. These numbers are made worse in older versions of the game where there's even less equipment available for a playthrough. Even in the Dawn of Souls versions, most of the equipment that was added to the game isn't available until the late game. The good news is, even with the lack of variety, Square saw fit to give each weapon its own sprite in battle. This is a bare minimum for me. If you're going to give me a different weapon in the inventory screen by name and on the damage spreadsheet, it really should be getting a new sprite in battle as well. I need to see the difference, and there are bonus points available for designers who can get me to really feel the difference. I'm not so much a stickler for how it looks unless the game is trying to tell me the weapon itself is important. The only aspect that changes how attacking feels is the evolution of the animation of spells. And even then, usually it means you're just waiting for more time for the animation to end, similar slightly larger number popping up on screen afterwards. Attacking with weapons plays the exact same sound effect, except every 4 hours or so, you'll get to swing your weapon 1 additional time per attack, visually. There is a number that goes up for how many times you've struck the enemy with a single attack, but this feels like a pedantic statistic since it doesn't match up with what's happening visually on screen. Final Fantasy I gets a big F for growth in attacks and abilities. Enemy design in the series thus far is non-existent. All of the enemies outside of the Dawn of Souls secret boss versions are being seen for the first time in this game, so in a way it will be easiest to judge these monsters without the bias of having seen any of them previously. That being said, the design is pretty lackluster. The enemies feel rather basic, even for a fantasy setting. Dragons end up being the scariest variant of enemy. This problem is exacerbated by probably the number one issue that plagues RPG monster design in the earlier years, which is repaints. I understand the need to fill your world with enough monsters that variety is technically achieved, but what I don't understand is thinking that doing this makes it a brand new enemy that you've encountered for the first time. If it's a different color because it's stronger, I would rather just see a beefier goblin. Why show me an ogre and his twin brother Ogre Chieftain if you're going to surprise me with their long-lost triplet Ogre Mage and their super secret identical brother and sister Yellow Ogre and Mad Ogre? Give them differently shaped clubs. Make them progressively taller or older. Give me some visual tie-in to the slight name and color palette change you're giving it. Repaints aren't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but it gets frustrating seeing so many video games make the exact same mistake of foregoing the creative process to make the 5th color of Zubat. Creature design for Final Fantasy I gets a D, because it's not technically bad, but the amount of repaints are. Character design can't be spoken of too harshly, seeing as all 4 of your characters are silent protagonists. NPCs and notable characters will speak when spoken to, but you will never return the favor, and they will never reach out first. The characters in future games do not have the problem of being mute, but I'm sure I'm going to wish that some of the future protagonists were as silent as these ones. Character design gets a D for it being average as well as underwhelming. You only get to change classes once, and even then it is optional. You're going to be looking and behaving virtually the exact same everywhere, all game. D tier character design. The world design is plagued slightly by the manner in which you're guided through it. That is to say, not at all. But if this game didn't expect you to understand what to do at certain points with obfuscated or non-existent signposting, this would be less frustrating. Final Fantasy I has a necessary cave you must enter before progressing past the Sleeping Prince. If you don't know it exists, because the only way to learn about it is through 1 or 2 pieces of dialogue, and all the available NPCs you need to meticulously question to find this hint are spread out over 2 opposite ends of an ocean you just got access to. There's no other way to learn about where to go. You've been given access to a massive portion of the map all at once, and were given 0 guidance. This left me feeling cramped from a navigational standpoint, and while it isn't the end of the world and the answer is a mere Google away, less motivated players could stop playing the game at this early roadblock. This is only a problem if you do no exploring at all on the map. It can be argued that Matoya's Cave is there to reward you and get you used to the idea of wandering for rewards, but it's not required for you to go anywhere near her until after you've crossed all the way over the ocean. This small issue of backtracking aside, the world map is rather small for RPGs, and while this serves to keep most things streamlined, in the end it doesn't feel like I have all that much to explore when I get the opportunity to finally do so. And when I do, I feel like I've already seen it before. D tier world design, and that's before it looks like it's from the NES. There you have it, guys. No more characters to invest in, towns and their inhabitants feeling like you've seen them before but in a different color, a small, uninteresting world with lackluster dungeon design, and gear that goes beyond favoring one character. I wouldn't consider this a bad game by any stretch, especially considering the time in which it was created. It's just simple. Final Fantasy I is officially, objectively, a D tier Final Fantasy game. If you do want to play it, I would recommend the PSP version. Somehow, I can still recommend the original version of Final Fantasy I as well, but only because it's the beginning of a behemoth franchise, and we all gotta start somewhere.